"Your father is still in that place," said the little girl at the station, "but when they go down the stairs, they discover something that changes their lives forever." Comment telling me what you thought of this story, giving it a score from 0 to 10, and let me know what city you're watching from. I really want to know if you liked my story and get to know you better. So please subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. On that chilly June morning in Asheville, North Carolina, businessman Theodore Sinclair opened the heavy mahogany door of his mansion in the city's upscale neighborhood and found something he never expected to see. A little girl of about 4 years old was standing on his porch, her clothes dirty and torn, her bare feet on the cold marble. Her brown hair was disheveled, and her small hands were trembling, not just from the Appalachian winter cold, but from something Theodore couldn't identify. "Are you the son of Jasper Sinclair?" the child asked, her small voice echoing in the luxurious entrance hall. Her large, dark eyes stared at Theodore with an intensity that was unsettling for someone so young. Theodore, 52, took a step back. His father's name was like an old wound that had never fully healed. Jasper Sinclair had disappeared 2 years ago after receiving a devastating Alzheimer's diagnosis. One morning, he was simply no longer at the nursing home where Theodore had placed him, and since then, no trace of him had been found. The police had closed the search after 6 months, assuming the old man had gotten lost in the mountains surrounding the city. "Who are you, little girl?" "Where do you know that name from?" Theodore asked, his voice laden with a mix of curiosity and pain. He was wearing a dark silk robe over his pajamas, his grey hair still messy from sleep. His morning routine of checking the reports from his freight transport company had been interrupted by the strangest appearance of his life. The girl introduced herself as Lily, a delicate name that contrasted with her abandoned appearance. "Your father is still in that place," she said, pointing toward the city center, where the chimneys of old factories mixed with colonial-style buildings. "He lives in the tunnels under the old station. He talks to me every day when I go get food." Theodore felt the world spin slightly. The old train station had been decommissioned for decades, becoming a place frequented by homeless people and drug addicts. It was the last place he would imagine finding his father, a man who had built a transport empire from nothing and who had always prized elegance and dignity. "That's impossible," he murmured. But something in the child's seriousness prevented him from simply closing the door. How does a child like you know my father?" Lily shrugged her thin shoulders. "Grandma B told me stories about him. She said he's very kind, but that he's lost in his own mind. She took care of him when he was little, a long time ago." The name Beatrice hit Theodore like a bolt of lightning. Beatrice Johnson had been his nanny throughout his childhood, a warm-smiled black woman who had raised him with more affection than his own parents. She had worked for the Sinclair family for over 20 years, until Catherine, Theodore's wife, had fired her without notice 15 years ago. Theodore had never questioned his wife's decision, too absorbed in his business to worry about domestic matters. "Is Beatrice alive?" he asked, his voice nearly breaking. "Where is she? Why aren't you with your parents?" Lily's expression grew even darker. "Grandma B is sick. She coughs a lot and sometimes faints. My parents. I don't have parents. I only have Grandma B, and she says she'll be meeting Mommy in heaven soon." Theodore dressed quickly, his heart pounding in his chest. A mixture of guilt, hope, and fear consumed him as he followed Lily through the streets of Asheville. The girl walked with the confidence of someone who knew every stone on the path, her bare feet navigating the sidewalk cracks with impressive agility. The city center was bustling on that Saturday morning, with merchants opening their shops and families heading to the farmers' market. Theodore noticed the curious glances they received, a well-dressed man accompanying a child, clearly in a state of neglect. Part of him wanted to go home, to pretend none of it was happening, but the possibility of finding his father again pushed him forward. The old train station rose before them like a ghost from the past. The red brick building was covered in graffiti and broken glass, its arched windows reminiscent of a prosperity that no longer existed. Lily led him through a gap in the fence surrounding the site, taking him through debris and accumulated trash. "He's down there," she said, pointing to an almost invisible entrance that led to the station's old maintenance tunnels. "But you have to call first. If we show up suddenly, he gets scared." Theodore descended the cracked concrete steps, the smell of dampness and urine invading his nostrils. The darkness of the tunnel was broken only by shafts of light filtering through the ventilation grates above. The sound of dripping water echoed in the claustrophobic space, creating a melancholy symphony that made his heart ache. That's when he heard the voice, faint but unmistakably familiar. "Lily, my girl, you're back," said an old man's voice. "Did you bring anything to eat today?" Theodore turned the corner of the tunnel and stopped, his breath caught in his throat. Sitting on a dirty, torn mattress, surrounded by plastic bags and empty cans, was Jasper Sinclair. His father, who had once been an imposing man in a suit and tie, was now just a thin, bearded shadow, wearing tattered clothes that barely protected him from the cold. "Dad," Theodore whispered, tears beginning to burn his eyes. Jasper looked up, his clouded eyes trying to focus on his son. For a moment, a spark of recognition shone in his pupils, but it quickly faded, replaced by the confusion characteristic of his condition. "Who are you, young man?" Jasper asked, his voice filled with suspicion. "Lily, do you know this man? He's not going to hurt us, is he?" The question shattered Theodore's heart into pieces. Theodore remained motionless for long seconds, watching his father, who did not recognize him. The pain of rejection mixed with the shock of seeing Jasper in that deplorable state. The man who had built the largest freight transport company in the region, who commanded meetings with authority and always wore impeccable suits, was now reduced to a frightened beggar in the underground tunnels of an abandoned station. "He won't hurt us. Grandpa Jasper," Lily said softly, approaching the old man and touching his hand tenderly. "This is your son, remember? The Theodore you always talk about when you're confused." Jasper observed Theodore more carefully, his eyes trying to penetrate the fog of his fragmented mind. "Theodore," he murmured, his voice wavering, "my boy has grown so much. But why are you here? Shouldn't you be working at the company?" The simple question hit Theodore like a punch. Even lost in the confusion of Alzheimer's, his father still worried about the family business. "Dad, I came to get you. You can't keep living here. This is no place for you. This is my home now," Jasper replied, clutching the plastic bags as if they were precious treasures. "Lily brings me food. Beatrice comes to visit me when she can walk. Here, I'm not a burden to anyone." Theodore felt his chest tighten at the word burden. For years, he had avoided dealing with his father's mental deterioration, preferring to pay for others to care for him in a nursing home. He had never stopped to consider how Jasper felt being treated like a problem to be solved. "Where is Beatrice now?" Theodore asked, crouching down beside Lily. The girl smelled of cheap soap, and her clothes, though dirty, seemed to have been washed recently. "She's at the downtown shelter," Lily explained, her small fingers playing with Jasper's grey hair. "But they only let her stay overnight when it's really cold. During the day, we stay here or at the church square, asking for money to buy medicine for her cough." The reality of the situation hit Theodore with full force. Beatrice Johnson, the woman who had dedicated 20 years of her life to caring for the Sinclair family, was now living on the streets, sick and abandoned. And not only that, she was caring for an orphan child and his lost father, taking on responsibilities that should have been his. "Lily, tell me about your parents," Theodore said gently. "What happened to them?" The girl looked down, her hands clenching the torn fabric of her blouse. "Mommy disappeared a few months ago. One day she was with us at the station. The next day she was gone. Grandma B said she went to look for work in another city, but I don't think she's coming back. And your father? I never had a father, Lily replied simply, without self-pity in her voice. Mommy said he left before I was born. Theodore looked around the dark tunnel, noticing the details he had missed in his initial shock. Jasper had created a kind of makeshift home, cans organized with utensils, a relatively clean blanket spread over the mattress, and on the concrete walls, small drawings made with charcoal that were clearly Lily's work. They were figures of flowers, houses, and people holding hands, creating a touching contrast with the brutality of the environment. "Dad, are you eating properly?" Theodore asked, noticing how thin and pale his father's face was. "Lily is a good girl," Jasper said, smiling at the child. "She shares her food with me even when there's little. Beatrice takes care of us too. We're a family now, aren't we, my dear?" The irony of the situation was not lost on Theodore. His father had found a family in the dark tunnels of the station, while he lived alone in his luxurious mansion, surrounded by wealth but empty of true connections. Catherine spent most of her time at social clubs or traveling, and his son, Brandon, 25, barely spoke to him, preferring the bohemian life that the family money provided. "I'm taking you all from here," Theodore said, making a decision that surprised even himself. "You can stay at my house until I find a better solution." "I can't leave Grandma B alone," Lily protested immediately. "She's very sick. Yesterday she fainted in the square and a bad man tried to mess with her." The fury Theodore felt upon hearing this surprised him. "Where is she now? We'll get her too." "You don't understand," Jasper said, his momentary lucidity returning. "I ran away from the nursing home because they treated me like an object there. They gave me medicine that made me apathetic. They wouldn't let me go out. They talked about me as if I wasn't there. Here at least I'm still a person." Theodore felt the weight of guilt crush his chest. He had chosen that nursing home specifically because it was discreet and efficient, because it would keep his father out of his daily life. He had never bothered to check if Jasper was happy there. "Things are going to be different now," he promised, not knowing exactly how he would fulfill that promise. "But first, let's find Beatrice." They left the tunnel together, Jasper reluctant, but finally agreeing to accompany them. In the daylight, his father's condition was even more shocking. His clothes were in tatters, his hair and beard needed to be cut, and he walked with the hunched posture of someone who had lost all dignity. The shelter in the city center was a low, exposed brick building with a line of people waiting outside. The smell of cheap food and disinfectant emanated from the place, mixed with the odor of bodies that lacked regular access to showers. Theodore had never set foot in a place like that in his entire life. Lily led them through the crowd, with the confidence of someone who knew the environment well. "Grandma B," she shouted, running toward an elderly woman sitting on a bench near the entrance. Theodore almost didn't recognize Beatrice Johnson. The woman who had been a second mother to him, always impeccable in her nanny uniform, was now unrecognizable. Her gray hair was unkempt, her clothes were a mixture of mismatched donated items, and her breathing was labored, interrupted by coughing spells that made her whole body contract. "Teddy," she whispered when she saw him, using the affectionate diminutive he hadn't heard in 15 years. "My boy, you've grown so much. But what are you doing here?" Tears welled up in Theodore's eyes as he heard her voice. "Beatrice, I didn't know you were going through this. If I had known—" "Don't worry, my son," she said, touching his face with wrinkled, calloused hands. "I know you have your life, your important commitments. I didn't expect you to remember an old nanny." The simplicity of her words made the pain even greater. Beatrice showed no anger or resentment, only the resignation of someone who had learned not to expect anything from life. It made Theodore realize how selfish he had become over the years. "You're all coming with me now," he said firmly. "All of you. I won't let you continue living like this." "And your wife?" Beatrice asked, a genuine concern in her voice. "Catherine never liked me. I don't want to cause trouble." Theodore thought of Catherine, who at that moment was probably at her Pilates class or planning the next social event. For the first time in years, he didn't care about her opinion. The arrival at Theodore's mansion was a moment of palpable tension. Catherine was in the main living room, arranging invitations for a charity event when she saw her husband enter, accompanied by a group that made her instinctively recoil. Jasper, dirty and confused, held Lily's hand, while Beatrice coughed violently, leaning on Theodore's arm. "What is this, Theodore?" Catherine asked, her voice laden with ill-disguised horror. She wore an immaculate white linen outfit, and her perfectly manicured nails contrasted with the devastated appearance of the people her husband had brought home. "Why did you bring these people here?" "This is my father, in case you've forgotten," Theodore replied, his voice firmer than he felt. "And this is Beatrice, who took care of me my entire childhood. They're going to stay with us." Catherine looked at Lily with an expression of evident displeasure. "And this child? Where did she come from?" "Theodore, you can't just show up at home with strangers from the streets. Think of our reputation, the consequences." "The only consequence I'm worried about right now is having abandoned my father when he needed me most," Theodore said, surprising himself with his own firmness. "Beatrice is sick and needs medical care. Lily is just a child who needs a safe home." "But Mr. Theodore," Beatrice murmured, clearly uncomfortable with Catherine's hostility, "maybe it's better if I go somewhere else. I don't want to cause trouble between you." "No," Theodore said categorically. "You took care of me when I was little. Now it's my turn to take care of you." Catherine turned to her husband with an expression of restrained fury. "We need to talk. Alone." She cast a cold glance at Beatrice before heading to the office, expecting Theodore to follow. Theodore asked Maria, the current housekeeper, to prepare rooms and meals for the newcomers before following his wife. The mahogany and leather office, which had always been his sanctuary, now seemed claustrophobic in the face of the reality he had discovered on the streets. "Have you completely lost your mind?" Catherine exploded as soon as the door closed. "Bringing these people into our home? And that dirty child? You don't even know where she came from, what diseases she might be carrying. She's an orphan child, Catherine. She was taking care of my father while you and I were living here, worrying about nothing but social appearances. Social appearances are important, Theodore. Our position in society, our business, all of it depends on how we're seen. You can't compromise that for a fit of social conscience." Theodore looked at his wife as if seeing her for the first time. Her perfectly coiffed blonde hair, her flawless makeup even on a Saturday morning, her expensive jewelry sparkling under the light of the crystal chandelier. When had she become a stranger to him? "Compromise what exactly?" he asked. "Our reputation as people who abandon sick family members on the street? Your father was being well cared for at the nursing home. He chose to run away and live like a beggar. That's not our fault. He ran away because they treated him like an object, Catherine. And Beatrice, you fired her without even consulting me. She worked for this family for 20 years. Catherine's face hardened. Beatrice was getting old, making mistakes. It was time for her to retire. I gave her a generous sum to get settled. What generous sum? She was living on the street. How could I have known? She probably misspent it all, like those people always do. The coldness of those words hit Theodore like a slap. For the first time in 20 years of marriage, he saw his wife clearly, not as the elegant woman he had fallen in love with, but as a person capable of calculated cruelty. "This conversation is over," he said, heading for the door. "They're staying. If that bothers you, you can go to your mother's house until you decide if you can live with people who actually need help." When Theodore left the office, he found Lily in the main hall, observing the paintings on the walls with childlike fascination. She had taken a bath and was wearing clean clothes that Maria had found, a simple dress that was too big, but which finally made her look like a normal child. "Uncle Theodore," she said, using the affectionate term spontaneously, "Grandma B is coughing a lot in her room, and Grandpa Jasper doesn't want to take off his old clothes to take a bath." Theodore went up the stairs, finding Maria trying to convince Jasper to accept help. The old man was clinging to his tattered clothes as if they were armor. "Dad," Theodore said softly, "these clothes are very dirty. Let's change them for something clean and comfortable." "These are my clothes," Jasper protested. "If I take them off, how will they recognize me? Lily knows me in these clothes. Beatrice too." His father's fragmented logic broke Theodore's heart. Jasper had lost so much, his mind, his home, his dignity, that he clung to the only possessions he had left. "Even if they were rags, you can keep them," Theodore promised. "But now you need to be clean and comfortable. Lily will still recognize you, I promise." It took almost an hour to convince Jasper to accept a bath, and only when Lily promised to stay outside the door, singing so he would know she hadn't left. While Maria took care of his father, Theodore went to the room where Beatrice had been settled. The woman who had been his second mother was sitting on the edge of the bed, looking out the window with a melancholy expression. Her hands trembled slightly, and her breathing was more labored than before. "How are you feeling?" he asked, sitting beside her. "Confused," she answered honestly. "For 15 years, I imagined what it would be like if we met again. I never thought it would be like this, with me in this condition. Beatrice, I need to know what really happened when you left. Catherine said she gave you money, but—" Beatrice laughed bitterly, a sound that brought on another coughing fit. "She gave me $300 and told me I had a week to leave the back house where I lived. She said you were selling the property and didn't need my services anymore, but we never sold anything. And $300 wasn't even enough for the first month's rent. I knew that," Beatrice sighed, "but I also knew that protesting would be useless. Catherine always detested me. From the day you got married, she saw me as a threat to her authority in the house. Why did you never contact me? I could have helped. Teddy, you were always so busy, so distant, and I didn't want to be another problem in your life. I preferred to face the difficulties alone." Theodore held Beatrice's hands, noticing how rough and marked they were by heavy work. "You were never a problem. You were the most important person in my childhood. And you were like a son to me," she replied, tears streaming down her wrinkled cheeks. "That's why I endured everything in silence. That's why I took care of your father when I found him lost at the station. Even after everything, you are still my family." That night, during dinner, the tension in the house was almost tangible. Catherine refused to eat at the main table, claiming she had lost her appetite. Theodore dined with Jasper, Beatrice, and Lily in the formal dining room, a setting that had never witnessed such a simple and genuine meal. Lily ate with the appetite of someone who wasn't sure when the next meal would be, but she always checked if Jasper and Beatrice were eating enough before serving herself again. Jasper, clean and dressed in proper clothes, looked more like the father Theodore remembered, although his moments of confusion were still frequent. "Lily," Theodore said during dessert, "tell me about your mother. How did she disappear?" The girl looked down, playing with her dessert spoon. "Mommy was very sad in the last few months. She cried a lot when she thought I was asleep. One day, she said she was going to look for work and would be back soon. That was 5 months ago. Did she leave anything? Any clue where she might have gone? Just a letter for Grandma B. But I can't read very well yet." Theodore looked at Beatrice, who seemed to hesitate before answering. "The letter. Violet asked me to take care of Lily if anything happened to her. She said she was involved in problems she couldn't solve on her own. What kind of problems? I don't know for sure. She worked cleaning offices in the city center, But in the last few weeks before she disappeared, she was very nervous, always looking over her shoulder on the street, as if someone was following her. An uncomfortable feeling began to form in Theodore's stomach. Something in that story wasn't right, and a part of him suspected that somehow his own life was connected to the disappearance of Lily's mother. The following Monday, Theodore decided to investigate Violet's disappearance more deeply. He left Jasper in the care of Maria and Beatrice, who despite her frail health insisted on helping, and took Lily with him to the city centre to try to trace her mother's last steps. The first stop was the building where Violet had worked as a cleaner. The commercial building housed several offices, including a branch of an accounting firm, a doctor's office and, to Theodore's surprise, the regional headquarters of a competitor company, Vance Transport, owned by his minority partner Ronald Vance. "Violet Smith," the doorman asked, when Theodore mentioned the name. "Oh, yes. The lady who cleaned the offices at night. Hard worker, very polite, but she stopped coming all of a sudden, about 5 months ago. Did she say anything? Give any explanation?" The doorman, a middle-aged man in an ill-fitting uniform, looked around before answering in a low voice. "Look, I shouldn't be telling you this, but she was very nervous in the last few weeks. I found her crying in the bathroom several times during her break. Nervous about what? I'm not sure, but I heard her telling a colleague that she had seen something she shouldn't have seen. Documents or something. She said she was scared." Lily held Theodore's hand tightly, her big eyes absorbing every word of the conversation. He could feel the girl's tension increase as they learned more about her mother's last days. "Could you tell me exactly which offices she worked in?" "All of them on the second floor. Accounting, the doctor, and the Vance Transport offices. But she cleaned those last ones after everyone had gone home, around 10 at night." Theodore felt a chill in his stomach. Ronald Vance had been his minority partner for 8 years, responsible for operations, while Theodore handled strategy and major contracts. There had never been any reason to distrust him, but something about this coincidence bothered him deeply. "Could you give me the contact information for Violet's colleague you mentioned?" "Rose cleans the first floor. She always arrives at 6 in the evening." Theodore thanked him and decided to wait until then to talk to Rose. In the meantime, he took Lily to lunch at a nearby diner, noticing how the girl observed everything around her with a mixture of curiosity and sadness. "Uncle Theodore," she said while eating her sandwich, "do you think we'll find my mommy?" "We'll try, little one," he replied, gently touching her hair. "But no matter what happens, you will always have a safe place with me, Grandma B, and Grandpa Jasper." "I like you guys," Lily said shyly. "Grandpa Jasper teaches me pretty words, even when he gets confused. And Grandma B strokes my hair before I sleep, just like Mommy used to." The child's simplicity and her ability to find comfort in small gestures deeply touched Theodore. In his 52 years, he had never experienced fatherhood, and finding himself caring for Lily was awakening feelings he didn't know he possessed. At 6 in the evening, they returned to the commercial building. Rose was a woman of about 40, thin and with the tired expression of someone who works multiple jobs. When she learned it was Violet's daughter, her face softened. "Poor thing," she said, crouching down to be at Lily's level. "Your mother talked about you a lot, said you were the most important thing in her life." "Does Aunt Rose know where Mommy went?" Lily asked hopefully. Rose exchanged a worried glance with Theodore before answering. "I don't know, honey, but I can tell you what happened in the last weeks before she disappeared." They sat in the building's lobby as Rose shared what she knew. Violet was cleaning the Vance Transport office one night when she found some papers left in the copy machine. She could read well. Your mother was very smart, and she recognized they were city contracts. "What kind of contracts?" Theodore asked, though he already suspected the answer. "School transportation." But the strange thing was that the values on the papers were different from what was being publicly announced. as if someone was over-invoicing the service. Theodore felt his blood run cold. His company had lost several school transport contracts in recent years to Vance Transport, always by very small margins. Ronald always claimed he could offer lower prices due to operational efficiency. What did Violet do with those papers? At first, nothing, but then she started noticing other strange things. Conversations she overheard while cleaning, documents left open on desks. She discovered there were bribery schemes involving city inspectors. And then she got scared, but she also felt she had to do something. She knew families from the poor side of town whose children depended on that school transport. If the money was being siphoned off, the children could be left without the service. Rose paused, looking at Lily, who was listening intently, processing information too complex for her age. Violet decided to find someone she trusted to report the scheme. Beatrice had told her about the Sinclairs, about how they had been good employers in the past. Violet thought about contacting Mr. Theodore, but she never contacted me, Theodore said, confused. Because before she could, someone found out she was investigating. One night, as she was leaving work, two men approached her in the parking lot. They told her to forget what she had seen and disappeared with the papers she had saved. Did she recognize them? They weren't from the company. They seemed professional. Violet was terrified, said she was going to get Lily and move to another city until things calmed down. But she disappeared before that, Theodore concluded. The last time I saw her, she was very agitated. She said she had discovered something even worse, something that proved the scheme was much bigger than she had imagined. She also said she had found a way to protect Lily if something happened to her. What way? She didn't tell me the details, but she mentioned she had left some things with someone she trusted. She said that if something happened to her, that person would know how to take care of her daughter. Theodore looked at Lily, who had remained silent throughout the conversation, absorbing information a child shouldn't have to process. He was beginning to understand that Violet's disappearance had not been accidental. She had discovered something that someone desperately wanted to keep secret. Rose, did you keep anything of Violet's? Any document, photo, anything? She gave me this, Rose said, pulling a small key from her pocket. She said that if anything happened to her, I should give it to someone who really cared about Lily. I think that person is you. The key was small and old, clearly from a locker or a drawer. It had no identification, but its existence confirmed that Violet had taken precautions before disappearing. Rose, I need you to promise me something, Theodore said. If anyone comes asking about our conversation today, you don't know me, and please be careful. If Violet was right about what she discovered, these people could be dangerous. When they left the building, Lily was unusually quiet. Theodore could see she was processing the conversation, trying to understand what had happened to her mother. Uncle Theodore, she finally said, was Mommy trying to help other kids when the bad men hurt her? The simple question hit Theodore like a stab wound. Your mother was a very brave woman, Lily. She wanted to do the right thing. So the bad men took her away because she wanted to help? Theodore didn't know how to answer. How do you explain to a 4-year-old that her mother had uncovered a corruption network and paid a price for her conscience? As they drove back home, Theodore felt the weight of multiple revelations. His partner was involved in corruption. Violet had disappeared for trying to do the right thing, and he himself could be in danger now that he was starting to investigate the truth. But looking at Lily in the seat beside him, determined and brave despite everything she had lost, Theodore knew he couldn't stop now. This child deserved to know the truth about her mother, and he would be the one to find it. That night, Theodore couldn't sleep. The key Rose had given him burned in his hand like a piece of incandescent metal. At 3 in the morning, He got up silently and went to check on Jasper, who was sleeping peacefully for the first time in months, and Lily, who was murmuring inaudible words in her restless dreams. Beatrice was awake when he passed by the hallway, sitting in a chair by the window, watching the full moon over Asheville. "Can't sleep either?" she asked softly. "How did you know about Violet?" Theodore asked, sitting on the bed beside her. "All this time, you knew she had worked cleaning offices." Beatrice sighed deeply, her breath still labored. "Violet came to me about 8 months ago after finding out through acquaintances that I had worked for your family. She was desperate, jobless, with a little daughter to raise on her own, and you helped her get the cleaning job. I knew Rose from seeing her around. We'd meet at the farmer's market sometimes. I asked her to recommend Violet when a position opened up. It was an honest job, well paid by her standards." Theodore noticed something in Beatrice's tone, a hesitation that suggested there was more to the story, but something went wrong, didn't it? "In the last few weeks before she disappeared, Violet came to visit me almost every day. She was terrified, said she had discovered terrible things at the office where she worked. She talked about fake contracts, money being stolen from poor children. Did she mention any specific names?" "Ronald Vance." Beatrice looked at him in surprise. "How did you know?" "Yes, she talked a lot about that man. Said he was deceiving you too, using your company to hide his crimes." The confirmation hit Theodore like a punch to the gut. Ronald had been his friend for almost a decade, had been the best man at Brandon's wedding, had dined at his house hundreds of times. The personal betrayal hurt as much as the professional one. Did Violet say anything else? The last time I saw her, she was very agitated. She said she had found out where Ronald kept the documents that proved everything, but that she needed help to expose him. She wanted to talk to you directly. "But why didn't she contact me?" Beatrice looked down, clearly uncomfortable. "Because Catherine found out she was asking about you. Violet had gone to your company, but your secretary said she would have to schedule a meeting through Ronald, who handled operational matters. Catherine knew that. Your wife called me the next day, furious. She said I was sending street people to bother you at work, and that if it happened again, she would make sure I never found a job in Asheville again." Theodore felt anger rise in his chest. Catherine had deliberately sabotaged Violet's attempts to contact him, and Ronald had used his position in the company to protect himself. "Beatrice, I need you to tell me where Violet kept the documents. Rose gave me a key, but I don't know what it's for. Violet rented a small locker at the bus station, where she kept some clothes and personal items in case she needed to leave town quickly. The number was 247 on the ground floor. The next morning, Theodore woke up early and headed to the bus station before Lily woke up. He didn't want to expose the girl to more potentially traumatic revelations about her mother. Locker 247 was small and discreet, located in a poorly lit corridor between the public restrooms and a convenience store. The key fit perfectly. Inside the locker, he found a small fabric suitcase containing simple clothes, some photos of Lily as a baby, and a sealed manila envelope with his name written on it in neat handwriting. His hands trembled as he opened the envelope. Violet's letter was long and detailed, revealing the full extent of the scheme she had uncovered. Ronald wasn't just over-invoicing school transport contracts. He had created a shell company that subcontracted the services, keeping the difference for himself and paying bribes to city inspectors to ensure there were no investigations. Even more shocking, Violet had discovered that Ronald was using the reputation of Theodore's company to get contracts in other cities, expanding the scheme throughout the region. The siphoned-off profits amounted to hundreds of thousands of dollars per month. Along with the letter, there were photos of documents, copies of contracts, and even audio recordings that Violet had secretly made during her nightly cleanings. The evidence was overwhelming and meticulously organized. The last page of the letter was personal. Mr. Sinclair, if something happens to me, please take care of Lily. I know from Beatrice that you are a good man, just blind to what's happening around you. My daughter has no one else in the world besides Grandma B, who is very sick. Promise me you won't let Lily suffer for the choices I've made. Theodore folded the letter carefully, putting everything in the suitcase. When he turned to leave, he almost bumped into a familiar figure. Ronald Vance was standing a few feet away, watching him with an expression that mixed surprise with something much darker. "Theodore? What a coincidence to see you here," Ronald said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Trouble with travel?" "Just taking care of some personal matters," Theodore replied, trying to keep his voice steady as he closed the locker. The suitcase in his hands felt like it weighed a ton. Personal matters. Ronald approached, his eyes fixed on the suitcase. "Anything I can help with? You know you can always count on me." The hypocrisy of those words made Theodore's stomach turn. "No, thank you. It was just something I needed to pick up." "Theodore, can I ask you a question?" Ronald discreetly blocked his exit path. "I heard you brought some people to your house recently. People from the street. Is that true? How did you know that? Asheville is a small town. News travels fast, especially when it involves well-known families like yours." Ronald paused significantly. "Don't you think it's dangerous to bring strangers near Catherine and Brandon?" "They're not strangers. They're people I should have helped a long time ago. Ah, yes, I heard about your father. It must be hard dealing with his illness. And that child. What's her name again?" Theodore felt a shiver run down his spine. "Why do you want to know?" "Just friendly curiosity." "Actually, someone told me she looks a lot like a woman who used to clean the offices downtown. Violet Smith, I think. Did you ever meet her?" The question was asked with studied casualness, but Theodore could see the tension in the muscles of Ronald's neck, the way his hands were clenching into fists. "I've never heard that name," Theodore lied. "That's strange. Because I also heard that someone was asking questions about her yesterday. In the building where she worked." Ronald took another step closer. "Theodore, I hope you're not getting involved in matters you don't fully understand." "What are you talking about?" "Sometimes, well-intentioned people end up in dangerous situations by trying to help those they can't help. This Violet person, for example. I heard she disappeared because she was getting involved with the wrong people, doing things she shouldn't have been doing." "What kind of things?" Ronald smiled, but the expression was cold. "Snooping. Collecting information that was none of her business. Sometimes curiosity can be very harmful to a person's health." The implied threat was clear. Theodore tightened his grip on the suitcase handle and tried to get around Ronald. "I have to go now." Of course, but Theodore." Ronald gently grabbed his arm, but firmly enough to stop him. "If you find anything that belonged to Violet, any document or personal item, it would be better to give it to me, for the good of everyone involved, especially for the good of that child you're protecting." The mention of Lily made Theodore's blood boil. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm offering friendly advice. Asheville can be a very dangerous town for small children when their guardians make reckless decisions." Theodore broke free from Ronald's grip with a sharp movement. "I think it's best if we keep our conversations strictly professional from now on." "Theodore," Ronald called out as he was walking away, "remember that we are partners. Anything that affects one affects the other. It would be a shame if our partnership of so many years ended because of misunderstandings." Theodore left the bus station with his heart racing, knowing he had crossed a line from which he could not return. Ronald knew he was investigating Violet's disappearance, and from the veiled threats, he was willing to do anything to protect his secrets. When he got home, he found Lily playing in the garden with Jasper, who was having a particularly lucid day. The sight of the girl laughing as she showed flowers to her father brought a steely determination to Theodore's chest. Ronald had made a mistake by threatening Lily. Now It was no longer just about justice for Violet or clearing his company's name. It was about protecting an innocent child from men capable of making a mother disappear for discovering the truth. And Theodore was determined to ensure that these men paid for their crimes, regardless of the personal cost. That afternoon, Theodore locked himself in his office with Violet's documents, trying to process the extent of Ronald's betrayal. The evidence was irrefutable: falsified contracts, receipts for irregular payments, even photos of secret meetings with city inspectors. Each page revealed a deeper layer of corruption that had grown right under his nose. The phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was Catherine, calling from the spa where she was spending the afternoon. "Theodore, I need to talk to you about these people you've brought home," she said without preamble. "I've received calls from several friends commenting on the situation. This is becoming a social scandal. Catherine, now is not the time to... It's always time to protect our reputation. And there's one more thing. Brandon told me you're asking strange questions about a woman named Violet. What the hell is going on?" Theodore felt a chill in his stomach. How did Brandon know that? Ronald called him early this morning, worried about you. He said you were acting strangely, investigating things you shouldn't be investigating. The realization that Ronald was manipulating his own family made Theodore's anger explode. "Catherine, Ronald is not who you think he is. He's involved in what? Theodore, you've been partners for 8 years. Ronald has always been a loyal friend to the family. If there's some misunderstanding..." "It's not a misunderstanding." Theodore's voice rose higher than he intended. "It's corruption, Catherine. Ronald is stealing public money, using our company to cover up crimes." The silence on the other end of the line was long and tense. When Catherine finally spoke, her voice was icy. "Theodore, are you listening to yourself? You're accusing our friend of serious crimes based on what? The delusions of a missing cleaning lady. The word of beggars you brought in from the street. I have proof, Catherine. Documents, photos, recordings, which can be easily forged by anyone with suspicious motives. Theodore, don't you realize you're being manipulated?" The accusation hit Theodore like a slap. For a moment, a seed of doubt sprouted in his mind. What if Catherine was right? What if his guilt over abandoning his father and Beatrice was clouding his judgment? But then he remembered the fear in Lily's eyes when she talked about her mother's last days, the meticulous way Violet had organized the evidence, risking her own life to protect other children. "Catherine, when you get home today, we are going to have a very serious conversation about many things. And I suggest you rethink your values before then." He hung up the phone and immediately dialed his personal lawyer, Mr. Martin. He was an upright man who had handled the family's legal affairs for over 15 years. "Mr. Martin, I need an urgent meeting. I have evidence of fraud involving my partner and municipal contracts. It's very serious. Can you come to my office now, Theodore? If it's as serious as it sounds, we need to act quickly to protect you legally." An hour later, Theodore was sitting in the lawyer's office, watching him carefully examine each document Violet had collected. Mr. Martin was a man in his 60s, meticulous and known for his unwavering integrity. "Theodore, this is explosive," he said finally, taking off his glasses and rubbing his eyes. "If this evidence is authentic, and by all indications it is, Ronald Vance has created a sophisticated criminal operation using your company as a front. What does that mean for me? Officially, you are the majority partner in the company. Even if you didn't know about the crimes, you will be investigated and potentially prosecuted as an accomplice. Your reputation, your assets, everything will be at risk." Theodore felt the world spin. "And if I report Ronald first, if I cooperate with the investigations, that would be your only chance to get out of this with any dignity intact. But Theodore, you need to understand that this will completely destroy your company. All contracts will be suspended. There will be federal investigations, lawsuits that will last for years. And if I do nothing, eventually the truth will come out. It always does. And when that happens, you'll be seen as a criminal who tried to cover it all up. The consequences will be much worse. Theodore thought of Lily, of Jasper, of Beatrice. He thought of the hundreds of children who depended on honest school transportation, of the poor families who were harmed by the embezzlement of public funds. Mr. Martin, if I report Ronald, will I be putting my family in danger? He has already made veiled threats. It's possible. Men who get to this point of corruption rarely back down without a fight. You'll need protection, maybe even consider moving out of town temporarily. When Theodore arrived home late that afternoon, he found a scene that both warmed and broke his heart. Lily was sitting on Jasper's lap in the garden, showing him drawings she had made. Beatrice, despite her persistent cough, was beside them, smiling as she listened to the girl explain each colorful scribble. "Grandpa Jasper, this one is you, me, and Grandma B flying like little birds," Lily was saying, pointing to simplified figures on the paper. "And this is Uncle Theodore visiting us in the clouds." "It's a very beautiful drawing, my dear," Jasper said, his voice clearer than it had been in days. "You have magical hands for drawing." Mommy used to say that too. She said that one day I would draw beautiful stories in books for other children. Theodore approached the group, sitting on the grass beside them. "Lily, can I see your drawings?" The girl proudly showed him her creations: families united, colorful houses, gardens full of flowers. In each drawing, all the figures were holding hands, smiling, protected by large hearts she had scribbled around them. "Uncle Theodore," Lily said, climbing onto his lap, "are you sad today? Why do you think that, little one? Your eyes are like Mommy's used to be when she had big problems. She said that sometimes adults have to make hard decisions to protect the ones they love." The girl's precocious wisdom left Theodore speechless. At 4 years old, Lily had already learned lessons about sacrifice and protection that many adults never understood. "Lily is right," Beatrice said softly, observing Theodore with her experienced eyes. "You discovered something today that changed everything, didn't you?" Theodore nodded, unable to speak. How could he explain to them that reporting Ronald would mean destroying the company that supported not only his family, but also dozens of employees and their families? "Grandma B always says that doing the right thing is hard," Lily continued, playing with the buttons on Theodore's shirt, "but that you sleep better at night afterward. Your grandma's very wise. She also says that Mommy did the right thing, even though she knew it was dangerous. That's why she was brave." At that moment, Theodore understood that Lily knew much more about her mother's disappearance than he had realized. The child had processed, in her own way, that Violet had sacrificed everything to do what was right. "Theodore," Jasper said suddenly, his voice filled with surprising lucidity, "I may not remember much, but I know how to recognize a man facing a choice that will define who he truly is." "What would you do, Dad?" "The same thing your mother would do. The same thing I tried to teach you when you were little, before money and success clouded your values." Jasper squeezed Theodore's hand with unexpected strength. "Do the right thing, my son, even if it costs you everything." That night, when everyone was asleep, Theodore made his final decision. He called Mr. Martin and scheduled a meeting for the next day with the competent authorities. He would report Ronald and hand over all the evidence collected by Violet, even knowing it would destroy his life as he knew it. But before going to sleep, he quietly entered Lily's room. The girl was sleeping, hugging a teddy bear that Beatrice had found among her things, murmuring inaudible words. On the table next to her bed were the drawings she had made during the day. Theodore picked one of them up, the drawing of the family flying like birds. In the corner of the sheet, Lily had written in crooked letters, "To Uncle Theodore, who will always protect us." He carefully folded the drawing and put it in his wallet, knowing he would need all the courage he could find to face what was coming. Outside, Asheville slept peacefully, unaware that the next day, one of the largest anti-corruption operations in the city's history would begin with the courage of a businessman who had chosen to protect an orphan child instead of his own wealth. The following morning brought a tension that seemed to permeate every corner of the Sinclair mansion. Theodore woke up before dawn, mentally preparing himself for the day that would change everything. At 8 o'clock, he was in Mr. Martin's office with representatives from the Public Prosecutor's Office and the IRS, formally handing over all the evidence collected by Violet. "Mr. Sinclair," said Prosecutor Anne-Marie Evans, a 40-year-old woman known for her integrity, "this evidence is extraordinarily detailed. Mrs. Smith clearly risked a lot to document all this. She risked her life." Theodore corrected, his voice filled with emotion. "And now, a 4-year-old child is motherless because of Ronald Vance's greed." "About that," interrupted Federal Agent Robert Lowe, "we will need to investigate her disappearance as well. If your suspicions are correct, it could be a much more serious crime than corruption." Theodore felt his stomach churn. Until that moment, he had focused on the financial fraud, but the possibility that Violet had been physically eliminated made everything even more sinister. "What happens now?" he asked. "Coordinated operation," the prosecutor explained. "Search and seizure warrants will be executed today at the Vance transport offices and all related locations. Ronald will be taken in for questioning, and my family. He's already made threats. We will provide temporary protection. But Mr. Sinclair, you need to understand that your company will be sealed during the investigations. All contracts will be suspended, bank accounts frozen." Theodore nodded, already expecting it. "I'll do whatever it takes." When he returned home around noon, he found a scene that put him on high alert. Catherine was in the main living room with Brandon, and to his surprise and horror, Ronald Vance was sitting comfortably in an armchair, drinking coffee as if it were a normal social visit. "Theodore," Ronald greeted with a smile that didn't hide the tension. "Glad you're here. We were just talking about you." "What are you doing in my house?" Theodore asked, keeping his distance. "I came as a friend, worried about your family. Catherine told me about your recent investigations. I thought we could talk like civilized men." Theodore looked at Catherine and Brandon, noticing how they both seemed uncomfortable but not hostile to Ronald's presence. "Where are Lily, Beatrice, and my father? The people you brought are in the back garden," Catherine answered coldly. "I thought it best they stay away from this adult conversation." The way she referred to them as "the people you brought" made Theodore's anger grow. "They have names, Catherine, and they are part of this family now." "Theodore," Ronald interrupted, standing up slowly, "I came here because I heard you're considering doing something very reckless, something that would harm not only our partnership, but also your family. What are you talking about? I heard that certain people have approached you with fantastic stories about irregularities in our business, desperate people willing to invent anything to get money." Brandon shifted uncomfortably on the sofa. "Dad, maybe we should listen to what Ronald has to say before." "Before what?" Theodore asked, staring at his son. "Brandon, what exactly did Ronald tell you?" "That you're being manipulated by this child and the people you brought home," Brandon replied, avoiding his father's gaze. "That they made up a story about the girl's mother to get money from you. And you believe that? Dad, you have to admit it was very convenient for this child to show up at our door just when you were vulnerable because of Grandpa." "Convenient," Theodore repeated, incredulous. "You think a 4-year-old orchestrated a plan to manipulate me?" Ronald approached, his posture seemingly friendly but with something threatening in his eyes. "Theodore, the evidence you think you have is easily explainable. Legitimate contracts, normal business procedures. Anyone with basic knowledge of forgery could have created convincing documents. And the audio recordings, conversations taken out of context, maliciously edited. Theodore, you're an intelligent man. You can't seriously believe I would spend 8 years building a solid partnership only to risk it all on criminal schemes. For a moment, Theodore hesitated. Ronald's argument was persuasive, and his family's worried expression was genuine. But then he remembered the fear in Rose's eyes when she handed him the key, the meticulous way Violet had documented everything, risking her own life. "Ronald, where were you yesterday morning around 9 o'clock? The seemingly casual question made Ronald blink rapidly. "Yesterday? At home? Why?" "Because you were at the bus station, watching me retrieve documents from Violet Smith's locker." The silence that followed was deafening. Catherine and Brandon looked at Ronald with expressions of growing unease. "Theodore, I don't know what you're talking about," Ronald said, but his voice had lost its previous confidence. "You threatened me, Ronald. You said it would be dangerous for Lily if I kept investigating. That's ridiculous. Why would I threaten a child?" At that moment, Lily's voice echoed from the garden, reaching them through the open window. She was singing to Jasper and Beatrice, her sweet voice a stark contrast to the tension in the room. "That girl," Ronald said, and something in his tone made everyone turn to him, "has a voice very similar to her mother's." The seemingly innocent observation sent a shiver down Theodore's spine. "How do you know what her mother's voice sounded like?" Ronald realized his mistake too late. I heard that." "Violet cleaned your offices at night, when you had already left. How did you know her voice?" Ronald's expression changed completely. The mask of friendly concern disappeared, replaced by something cold and calculating. "Theodore, you're playing with fire." "Dad," Brandon said nervously, "maybe we should stop this conversation." "No," Theodore exploded. "Enough stopping conversations, enough avoiding the truth." He turned to Ronald. "Did you kill Violet Smith?" "Theodore," Catherine screamed, horrified. "How can you make such an accusation?" "Because I have evidence, Catherine. Because that innocent child is motherless because of this man's greed." Ronald laughed, a humorless sound. "Evidence? Theodore, you have no evidence of anything beyond minor administrative irregularities. And as for Violet Smith..." He paused dramatically. "She simply decided to abandon her daughter and start a new life somewhere else. It happens more than you'd think with desperate women. That's a lie, is it? Where's the body then? Where's the proof of violence? All you have are conspiracy theories based on the fantasies of a disturbed cleaning lady." Theodore lunged toward Ronald, but was interrupted by the sound of approaching sirens. Through the window, they could see several official cars stopping in front of the mansion. "Theodore," Ronald said calmly, "I hope you're sure about what you're doing, because accusing an innocent man of crimes he didn't commit has very serious legal consequences." Prosecutor Anne-Marie Evans entered the room accompanied by federal agents showing a warrant for his arrest. "Ronald Vance, you are under arrest for criminal organization, active and passive corruption, and money laundering." As Ronald was being handcuffed, he maintained eye contact with Theodore. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "You don't know who you're messing with, and that child, she will pay for your choices." The explicit threat to Lily made Theodore step forward, but the agents were already taking Ronald away. Catherine collapsed onto the sofa, her face pale. "Theodore, what have you done? What does this mean for us?" Before he could answer, Lily appeared at the living room door, her big eyes fixed on the movement of the official cars. "Uncle Theodore, did the bad men take away the man who made Mommy cry?" Theodore knelt down to the girl's level. "How did you know he made your mother cry?" "He used to come to our house sometimes when Mommy got home from work. She would get very scared and hide me in the closet, but I could hear him yelling at her." The revelation struck everyone in the room like lightning. Ronald not only knew who Violet was, he had stalked her to her home, terrorizing a child in the process. "Lily," Theodore said gently, "do you remember anything else about that man?" "He told Mommy that if she told his secrets, bad things would happen to me." That's why Mommy cried so much." Theodore hugged Lily tightly against his chest, finally understanding the extent of the terror Violet had lived through. She hadn't just discovered Ronald's corruption, she had been systematically threatened and intimidated until she disappeared. "Now we're going to find your mommy," he promised. "I promise we'll find her." But even as he made the promise, Theodore couldn't ignore the growing feeling that it might be too late to find Violet alive. The days following Ronald's arrest were a whirlwind of investigations, interrogations, and devastating revelations. Theodore spent most of his time at the federal police headquarters, collaborating with the authorities while his company remained sealed and his personal life crumbled. Catherine had moved to her mother's house, taking only a few clothes and an expression of disgust that said everything about how she viewed her husband's choices. Brandon tried to maintain a neutral position, but it was evident he felt betrayed by his father for destroying the family's financial stability. "Dad," he said one particularly tense afternoon, "you need to understand that I agree Ronald was wrong, but to destroy our entire company over a woman we didn't even know." "Brandon," Theodore interrupted, "that woman had a name, Violet Smith, and she disappeared because she tried to do the right thing. If you can't see the importance of that, then I have failed as a father much more than I imagined." During this chaotic period, the only constant in Theodore's life was the time he spent with Lily, Jasper, and Beatrice. The girls seemed to sense that the adults around her were going through difficult times, and her presence brought an unexpected calm to the tumultuous house. "Uncle Theodore," she said one morning while they were playing in the garden, "are you looking for Mommy every day?" "Yes, little one. The special people are helping to look for her. What if she doesn't want to come back?" The simple question broke Theodore's heart. Why do you think she wouldn't want to come back? Sometimes Mommy got very sad. She said the world was too hard and that I would be better off without her. Theodore hugged Lily, realizing the child had heard things no 4-year-old should ever hear. Violet had been depressed in the months before she disappeared. Tormented by Ronald's threats and the impossibility of protecting her daughter, it was at that moment the phone rang. It was Prosecutor Anne-Marie Evans. "Mr. Sinclair, you need to come to the office immediately. We have news about Violet Smith." Theodore left Lily with Beatrice and rushed to the city center, his heart pounding in his chest. In the prosecutor's office, he found Anne-Marie with a grim expression. "Did they find her?" he asked before even sitting down. "In a way, yes. Ronald talked during today's interrogation. Not about the financial crimes. He continues to deny everything, but about Violet." "What did he say?" "That she isn't. That she wasn't murdered as we suspected." Theodore felt a mix of relief and confusion. "So where is she?" Anne-Marie sighed deeply. According to Ronald, after the last threats, Violet had a nervous breakdown. She was found at the train station in a catatonic state, without any identification. She was admitted to a public psychiatric clinic in Charlotte as an unidentified patient. "Is she alive?" Theodore's voice almost failed. "Apparently, yes. But Mr. Sinclair, there are complications. According to the records we were able to locate, the patient doesn't speak, doesn't react to external stimuli, doesn't recognize anyone. The trauma of what she went through may have caused severe psychological damage." Theodore sat down heavily in the chair. "Can I see her? Can I take her home? We'll arrange a visit. But I need to prepare you. The person you find may not be the Violet that Lily remembers." The next morning, Theodore traveled to Charlotte, accompanied by Mr. Martin and a private psychiatrist, Dr. Edward Roberts, whom Anne-Marie had recommended. The Santa Rita Clinic was a low, grey building on the outskirts of the city, with the typical institutional feel of public psychiatric hospitals. Female patient, approximately 28 years old, admitted 5 months ago, explained Dr. Carmen Santos, the psychiatrist in charge. She presented with a catatonic state upon arrival. She carried no documents, only a small bag with some clothes and a photo of a child. "The photo," Theodore said immediately. "Can I see it?" The doctor showed him a crumpled, faded photograph of Lily smiling, probably taken a few months before Violet's disappearance. It was the only clue to her identity we had. "How is her condition now?" "It has improved significantly in recent weeks. She has started speaking again, though not much. She recognizes her own name when called, but she still has episodes of dissociation and cannot consistently form new memories." Theodore was led through corridors that smelled of disinfectant and institutional sadness. When he reached Violet's room, he stopped at the door, bracing himself for what he would find. Violet Smith was sitting in a chair by the window, looking out at the clinic's internal garden. She was too thin, her brown hair was cut irregularly, and she wore a faded blue hospital gown. But even diminished by the circumstances, Theodore could see the delicate beauty that Lily had inherited from her. "Violet," he called softly. She turned slowly, her large dark eyes focusing on him with difficulty. For a moment, there was no recognition. Then, something in her expression changed. "You're the man from the company," she said, her voice hoarse from months of little use. "I tried to talk to you about the children, about the money stolen from the children. Yes, Violet, I'm Theodore Sinclair, and I've come to get you. Get me." She seemed confused. "But I can't leave here. The bad men, they'll find me. They'll hurt Lily. The bad men have been arrested, Violet. Ronald Vance is in jail. You and Lily are safe now." Upon hearing her daughter's name, something lit up in Violet's eyes. "Lily, my little girl. Where is my little girl? She's with me. She's safe, well cared for. She knows you didn't abandon her. She knows you were trying to protect her." Tears began to stream down Violet's face. "I remember. A little. They took me. They said if I talked about the papers, they would hurt her. I tried to run, but—" "You don't have to remember everything now," Theodore said gently, sitting in a chair beside her. "The important thing is that you're alive and we're taking you home." "Home?" Violet looked around the sterile room. "I don't have a home. I lost the apartment. I lost my job. Lily. Where is Lily living? With me. With Beatrice. You remember Beatrice? And with my father, Jasper. We've become a family." Violet studied Theodore's face for a long moment. "Why? Why did you take care of her? You didn't even know me, because it was the right thing to do, and because Lily taught me that family isn't just about blood, it's about choosing to care for one another." Dr. Edward Roberts spoke at length with Violet and the clinic's doctors. His diagnosis was cautiously optimistic. With proper treatment, a stable environment, and a lot of love, Violet could fully recover from the trauma. "It will take time," he explained to Theodore on the way back. "She'll need intensive therapy, anxiety medication, and above all, patience. The memories of what happened may come back gradually, and that can be painful. But will she be okay? With the right support, yes." The fact that she remembered Lily immediately is a very positive sign. When they arrived in Asheville late that afternoon, Theodore asked to stop the car a few blocks from the house. "Violet, I need to prepare you for a few things. Lily has matured a lot during these months. She'll be very happy to see you, but she might also be confused or even angry that you left." Violet nodded nervously. "What if she doesn't remember me properly? What if I don't know how to be her mother anymore?" "You never stopped being her mother, Violet. Lily talks about you every day. She knows you love her." When they entered the mansion, Lily was in the living room playing with dolls that Beatrice had gotten from somewhere. She looked up casually when she heard footsteps. Then her entire small body froze. "Mommy," she whispered, her voice so low it was barely audible. Violet knelt on the floor, her arms outstretched. "Hi, my love. Mommy's back." Lily ran into her mother's arms with a speed that moved Theodore. Mother and daughter hugged in the middle of the room, crying and laughing simultaneously as 4 months of separation and fear dissolved in that reunion. "I knew you'd come back," Lily sobbed. "Grandma B said you were looking for work, but I knew you'd come back for me. I'm never leaving you again, my little one," Violet promised, covering her daughter's face with kisses. "Never again." Theodore watched the scene with a full heart, knowing he had made the right choice, even if it had cost him everything he owned. His company was destroyed, his marriage over, his reputation tarnished. But there, watching a mother and daughter reunited, he knew no price was too high for that moment of pure happiness. In the weeks following the reunion, the Sinclair house gradually transformed into something it had never been before, a real home. Violet was still fragile, often lost in thought or haunted by fragmented memories of the trauma, but her presence brought a new light to Lily's eyes that radiated throughout the family. Dr. Edward came 3 times a week for therapy sessions with Violet, always accompanied by Theodore, who had become not only responsible for her treatment, but genuinely concerned for her well-being. During these sessions, pieces of the story were reconstructed. "Violet, Dr. Edward said on a particularly productive afternoon, can you remember the specific day you decided to leave Lily with Beatrice?" Violet clasped her hands in her lap, her face contorting with the effort to remember. "Ronald had shown up at my house the night before. I don't know how he found out where I lived. He came in without permission, went through my things, found the papers I had hidden." "What papers?" Theodore asked, though he already knew the answer. "Copies of the fake contracts, photos of the documents, everything I had gathered over months. He took it all and said that if I told anyone about what I had discovered, Lily would pay the price." Violet's hands began to tremble. He described in detail what he would do to her. He said he knew men who did terrible things to little children, and that it would be very easy to make Lily disappear. Theodore felt a cold anger rise in his chest. Even knowing Ronald was in prison, the idea that he had specifically threatened to hurt Lily made him want to destroy him with his own hands. "Was that when you decided to leave her with Beatrice?" "I thought if I disappeared, if Ronald believed I had fled the city without saying anything, Lily would be safe. Beatrice was the only person I trusted completely. But you didn't flee the city." Violet shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I was going to. I had bought a bus ticket to New York, but the night before I was supposed to leave, I couldn't resist. I went back to see Lily one last time, just to make sure she was okay. And that's when they got you? Ronald was watching me. He knew I would come back." "When I left Beatrice's house, 2 men cornered me in the alley. They didn't hurt me physically, but they gave me an injection of something that made me confused and disoriented." Dr. Edward made notes as he listened, probably a strong sedative. "That would explain the initial catatonia when you arrived at the clinic. I remember waking up in a van, completely lost. I didn't know where I was, could barely think straight. They left me at the train station in Charlotte with a suitcase that wasn't mine and no documents. But why didn't they kill you?" Theodore asked, though the question was hard to ask. "Ronald was smart," Dr. Edward replied. "Killing Violet would create evidence, a body, an investigation. Making it seem like she had voluntarily abandoned her daughter and disappeared was much cleaner, especially if she couldn't remember anything due to the sedatives." Violet looked at Theodore with gratitude in her eyes. "If you hadn't looked for me, if you hadn't believed that I hadn't voluntarily abandoned Lily, I would still be there, not even knowing my own name." During these weeks of recovery, Theodore also faced the financial consequences of his choices. His company was officially bankrupt, all contracts cancelled, and Ronald's lawyers were filing lawsuits alleging defamation and wrongful imprisonment. The fortune that had taken decades to build was dissolving in a matter of weeks. Mr. Sinclair, said his accountant, John Paul, during a particularly grim meeting, if we don't find a source of income soon, you'll have to sell the mansion to pay the debts and legal costs. Theodore looked out his old office window, watching Lily and Violet playing in the garden. How much time do we have? 2, maybe 3 months if we cut back drastically. That evening, Theodore called a family meeting. Besides Jasper, Beatrice, Violet and Lily, he invited Brandon, who had reluctantly agreed to attend. I need to be honest with all of you, he began, sitting at the head of the dining table. Our financial situation is dire. In a few months, we will have to sell this house and start our lives over in a much simpler way. Brandon sighed dramatically. Dad, it's not too late. If you publicly retracted the accusations against Ronald, if you admitted you might have been misled by the evidence. Brandon, Theodore interrupted firmly, Ronald is guilty. The investigations are confirming that day by day. I will not retract doing the right thing. The right thing, Brandon exploded. Dad, you destroyed our family for people you barely know. I didn't destroy our family. Brandon, I discovered that our wealth was built on the suffering of others and chose to do something about it. Violet, who had remained silent during the discussion, finally spoke up. Brandon, may I say something? He looked at her impatiently but nodded. When I discovered the crimes that were being committed, my first reaction was to keep quiet. I thought of Lily, of our safety, our stability. I just wanted to keep our small but safe life. Violet paused, organizing her still fragmented thoughts. But then I thought of the hundreds of children who depended on that honest school transport. I thought of the parents who worked hard paying taxes that were being stolen. I thought of how I would feel if my daughter suffered because of other people's greed. That's different, Brandon argued. You had nothing to lose. My father had a company, employees, responsibilities. You're right, Violet agreed. I had nothing to lose but my daughter's life. Your father had much more to lose, and yet he made the right choice. That doesn't make him less of a man. It makes him a hero. Beatrice, who had listened to everything in silence, finally spoke. Brandon, I've taken care of your father since he was a baby. I saw him grow up, graduate, build this company, but I've never been prouder of him than in these last few weeks. Why? Brandon asked, genuinely confused. Because he chose to be the man I always knew he could be. Not the successful businessman who impresses society, but the good man who protects those who need protecting. Jasper, who had increasingly rare moments of lucidity, surprised everyone by speaking clearly. Son, when I was young and building this company, I had many opportunities to make money dishonestly. I always chose the harder path because I wanted my children and grandchildren to inherit something clean. He looked directly at Brandon. Your father is cleaning up the mess that accumulated in our company. He's giving you back an inheritance of dignity, even if it costs money. His grandfather's words clearly impacted Brandon. He was silent for a long time before speaking again. And now, what are we going to do, concretely? Theodore had spent days thinking about that very question. We'll sell the mansion and buy a smaller house. I'll look for a job, maybe go back to being a truck driver, like I did when I was young. Beatrice, Jasper, Violet, and Lily will continue to live with us. And Mom, your mother made her choices. The doors of this family will always be open to her, but only if she can accept that we are all equal in dignity, regardless of how much money we have in the bank. Lily, who had remained quiet playing with her dolls during the entire adult conversation, suddenly looked up. Uncle Theodore, she said in her sweet voice, if we go live in a smaller house, will there still be room for me to draw? The simple, innocent question touched the hearts of everyone at the table. Theodore knelt beside her chair. There will always be room for you to draw, little one. There will always be room for everything that is truly important. Lily smiled and went back to her dolls, satisfied with the answer. For her, who had lived in station tunnels and public shelters, the size of the house was irrelevant. What mattered was being surrounded by people who loved her. That night, for the first time in months, Theodore slept soundly. Not because his problems had been solved, but because he had finally found peace with his choices. He had traded material wealth for human wealth and discovered that the latter was worth infinitely more. 3 months after the family meeting, the move to the new house brought unexpected challenges that tested everyone's resilience. The small residence in the Mill Creek neighborhood had only 3 bedrooms, a modest living room, and a yard that seemed tiny compared to the mansion's gardens. Theodore had found a job as a truck driver for a regional freight company, a job that kept him away for days at a time. The first few weeks were especially difficult for Jasper, whose confusion increased with the change of environment. He would wander through the small house looking for rooms that didn't exist, calling for staff who were no longer there, trying to find the office where he used to work. "Beatrice, where are my contracts?" he would ask repeatedly, rummaging through empty drawers. "I have an important meeting with the city inspectors today." Beatrice, whose health had deteriorated with the stress of the move, did her best to calm him. "Your son is taking care of the business now, Mr. Jasper. You can rest." "Rest? But the company? Who will take care of the company if I rest?" It was Lily who could most effectively soothe her grandfather in his moments of agitation. She had developed an impressive patience for a 4-year-old, sitting beside him and showing him her drawings until he calmed down. "Grandpa Jasper, look at this drawing I made for you," she would say, showing colorful scribbles of trucks and roads. "It's Uncle Theodore driving to beautiful places. What a lovely drawing, my dear," Jasper would reply, his agitation gradually subsiding. "You draw better than any architect I've ever hired." Violet was progressing in her therapy, but still had bad days when the memories of the trauma returned with force. Dr. Edward had warned that it would be a long process, with progress and setbacks. On her difficult days, she would isolate herself in her room, leaving Theodore and Beatrice to care for Lily. "Is Mommy sick today?" Lily would ask when she found Violet crying silently in her room. "Your mum is healing, little one," Theodore would explain. "Sometimes, when people have been through very sad things, they need time for their hearts to get strong again. Like when I hurt my knee and it needed a bandage every day." "Exactly. Except your mum's hurt is in her heart, so it takes longer to heal." The financial situation was becoming unsustainable. Theodore's salary as a trucker was enough for basic needs, but it didn't cover Jasper's medications, Violet's therapy sessions, or Beatrice's medical expenses, who needed treatment for her respiratory problems. One morning, as Theodore was preparing for another 3-day trip, Brandon appeared at the door with a serious expression. "Dad, we need to talk." They sat in the small kitchen, drinking coffee from simple mugs that contrasted with the fine china they used to use at the mansion. "I've been thinking a lot about our last conversation," Brandon began, "and you were right about some things." Theodore raised his eyebrows, surprised. "About what?" "About doing the right thing, even when it's expensive. About dignity being more important than money." Brandon paused, clearly uncomfortable. "I spoke with Mom yesterday." "How is she?" "Bitter. She blames you for everything, for the loss of the mansion, the change in lifestyle, the social embarrassment. She said she'll never accept this. This family you've built." Theodore felt a deep sadness, but no surprise. "And you? How do you feel about it?" "Honestly, I'm mad at you for destroying our financial stability, but I'm also starting to understand why you did it." Brandon looked through the window at the yard where Lily was playing with Jasper. "I've never seen Grandpa as affectionate with anyone as he is with Lily. And Violet. She looks at you like you're a hero." "I'm no one's hero, Brandon. I just did what any decent person would do." "Maybe. But the point is, most people aren't decent when it costs them." Brandon took a deep breath. "Dad, I want to help. How? I got a job at an accounting firm in Charlotte. It's not much, but I can contribute part of my salary to the household expenses. Theodore felt his eyes fill with tears. Brandon. It's not for the others, Brandon said quickly. It's for you. Because despite everything, I still believe you're a good man. And because maybe I want to learn to be like you. That afternoon, after Brandon left for Charlotte, Theodore received an unexpected call. It was Prosecutor Anne-Marie Evans. Mr. Sinclair, I have important news about the Ronald Vance case. What kind of news? We've managed to recover a large portion of the embezzled money. There's a possibility of restitution for the victims of the crimes, including you as an injured partner. Theodore sat down heavily on the sofa. How much? How much are we talking about? They're still calculating, but it could be enough for you to start over. Not at the previous level, but enough for a comfortable life. And Ronald, he'll be sentenced to at least 15 years in prison. He tried for a plea deal, but he didn't have enough information on other cases to justify a reduced sentence. When he hung up the phone, Theodore sat for a long time processing the information. The possibility of financial recovery should have made him happy, but he found he only felt relief that he could offer a better life to his makeshift family. Uncle Theodore, Lily said, appearing in the living room with a new drawing in her hands. I made this for you. It was a drawing of a small house with many colorful windows. In front, simple figures represented the whole family: Theodore, Violet, Lily, Jasper, Beatrice, and even Brandon, all holding hands under a bright yellow sun. It's our new house, she explained. It's not as big as the old one, but it has more love inside. Theodore hugged Lily, understanding that the child had perfectly captured what had taken him months to understand. Wealth wasn't measured in square feet or zeros in a bank account. It was measured in moments like that, when a 4-year-old could see beauty and love where others saw only loss. Lily, he said, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to draw beautiful stories in books, like Mommy always said, she answered without hesitation. And I want to take care of people who are sad, like you took care of us. You'll be amazing at whatever you choose to do. That night, after everyone was asleep, Theodore went out into the small yard and looked at the stars over Asheville. 6 months ago, he was a rich and respected businessman, but empty inside. Now he was a truck driver with debts, living in a modest house, but surrounded by a family he had chosen and who had chosen him back. The transformation hadn't been easy, and he knew they would still face many challenges. Violet's recovery would be long. Jasper's and Beatrice's health would continue to deteriorate, and rebuilding financial stability would take years. But for the first time in his adult life, Theodore felt he was exactly where he should be, being exactly who he should be. He had discovered that true success wasn't in building an empire, but in building a family based on unconditional love. And looking at the small but vibrant house, he knew he wouldn't trade this wealth for all the fortune in the world. 6 months after the move to the new house, an October morning brought a revelation that would change everything again. Theodore was having breakfast before leaving for another trip when the phone rang. It was Dr. Edward Roberts, Violet's psychiatrist, his voice urgent. Mr. Sinclair, I need you to come to my office today. Violet had a significant breakthrough in therapy yesterday, but there are complications we need to discuss together. What kind of complications? She remembered something crucial from the period before her disappearance, something that could completely change our understanding of what happened. Theodore cancelled his trip and took Violet to the office, leaving Lily with Beatrice. During the drive, Violet was visibly agitated, nervously wringing her hands and looking out the window as if she feared being followed. Violet, what did you remember? He asked gently. I wasn't the only person investigating Ronald, she said, her voice trembling. There was someone else, someone from inside his own company. At the office, Dr. Edward explained that during the previous day's hypnotherapy session, Repressed memories had emerged with crystal clarity. "Tell him what you told me yesterday," the doctor encouraged. Violet took a deep breath, organizing thoughts that had remained fragmented for months. 2 weeks before I disappeared, I received a call from a woman. She said she knew about my investigation and wanted to meet me. What woman? She identified herself as Patricia Mendez, Ronald's executive secretary for 3 years. She said he had discovered she was copying documents and that her life was in danger. Theodore felt a chill. "Did you meet with her?" "Yes. We met at a diner downtown." Patricia was terrified, said Ronald had found out she was collecting evidence of his crimes to turn over to the authorities. Why was she doing that? Violet closed her eyes, concentrating on the memory. Her son, a 7-year-old boy, depended on the municipal school transport. When she discovered that Ronald was siphoning funds that should have guaranteed the transport's safety and quality, she became furious. What did she tell you? Much more than I had discovered on my own. Ronald wasn't just over-invoicing contracts, he was providing buses in terrible safety conditions with no proper maintenance to maximize profits. The revelation hit Theodore like a lightning bolt. Children were traveling in unsafe vehicles? Worse than that. Patricia showed me falsified maintenance reports, documents that proved Ronald knew the risks and chose to ignore them to save money. "Doctor." Edward made a note before continuing. "Violet, tell him about the accident." "What accident?" Theodore asked, though he already feared the answer. 3 days before I disappeared, one of the school buses broke down in the middle of a steep hill. The brake system failed completely. 16 children were injured when the bus went off the road. Theodore vaguely remembered reading about the accident in the local paper, but at the time he was so absorbed in his own problems that he hadn't paid attention to the details. Patricia had proof that that specific bus had failed 3 safety inspections, but Ronald had falsified the documents to keep it in circulation. Where is Patricia now? Violet exchanged a worried look with Dr. Edward. "She disappeared the same day I did. We were going to meet again to turn over all the evidence to the authorities together, but she never showed up. Do you think?" "I think Ronald found out about our partnership and decided to get rid of both of us at once. The difference is, I was found. Patricia wasn't." Dr. Edward explained that this revelation had been extremely traumatic for Violet, triggering feelings of guilt for having survived when Patricia possibly hadn't been so lucky. Violet blames herself for not acting faster, for not turning in the evidence before the bus accident. "I could have prevented those children from getting hurt," Violet sobbed. "If I had been braver, if I had gone to the authorities immediately." "Violet, you are not responsible for Ronald's criminal choices," Theodore said firmly. "You risked your life trying to do the right thing." Leaving the office, Theodore went straight to the prosecutor's office. Anne-Marie Evans listened to the new information with an increasingly grim expression. "Mr. Sinclair, this completely changes the scope of the case. If Patricia Mendez really disappeared, and there's evidence that children were deliberately put at risk, what does that mean? It means Ronald could be facing much more serious charges: murder, attempted murder, endangering the lives of minors. And what about Patricia? Will you look for her? I'll open an investigation immediately. If she's alive, we'll find her. If she's not." And Marie didn't finish the sentence. That afternoon, Theodore returned home with the weight of another devastating revelation. He found Lily in the yard, drawing while Jasper dozed in a chair in the sun. The normality of the scene contrasted painfully with the horror he had discovered. "Uncle Theodore," Lily said cheerfully, "I drew you driving the big truck. What a beautiful drawing, little one." He sat beside her, looking at the colorful scribbles that represented trucks, roads, and mountains. "Uncle Theodore, can I ask something?" "Always. Why do adults sometimes do bad things that hurt children?" The question surprised him. "Why are you thinking about that? I heard Mommy talking to Grandma B about a man who hurt kids on the school bus. They stopped talking when they saw me, but I heard. Theodore sighed, realizing he couldn't completely protect Lily from the reality of the world. Sometimes, Lily, some people make bad choices out of greed or malice. They forget that their actions affect other people. Like the bad man who made Mommy sad. Exactly like him. Lily stopped drawing and looked directly at Theodore. But you always make good choices, even when it's hard. That's why I love you. The simplicity of the declaration brought tears to Theodore's eyes. I love you too, little one. Very, very much. That night, after everyone was asleep, Theodore stayed awake thinking about the implications of Violet's revelation. Patricia Mendez was a woman with a son, trying to do the right thing, and had disappeared for it. How many other people had Ronald harmed over the years? He thought of the 16 children injured in the bus accident, of their desperate parents, of the trauma they would carry for the rest of their lives. He thought of Lily, who, despite everything she had been through, could still see kindness in the world and love in the people around her. The journey that had begun with a 4-year-old child appearing on his doorstep was far from over. There were more truths to be discovered, more victims to be helped, more justice to be sought. But looking at the picture Lily had drawn of him driving his truck, Theodore knew he was on the right path. No matter how many dark secrets were yet to be revealed, he would face everything with the same determination he had used to protect his makeshift family. Because some fights were worth any sacrifice, and protecting the innocent was always a just cause, regardless of the personal cost. And in the morning, a new battle would begin to find Patricia Mendez and ensure that all of Ronald Vance's victims finally received the justice they deserved. 2 years later, on a sunny December morning, Theodore watched from the window of his new house, larger than the last, but still modest, the activity in the yard. Lily, now 6, was patiently teaching Jasper how to paint with watercolors, while Violet arranged a picnic under the shade of the mango tree they had planted together. The search for Patricia Mendez had ended 6 months ago, with a discovery that brought both relief and sadness. She was alive, admitted to a private psychiatric hospital in Washington, D.C., under a false name she herself had adopted after fleeing Asheville. The trauma of what she had discovered about Ronald, combined with direct threats to her son's life, had caused a severe nervous breakdown that left her with no memory for nearly 2 years. Mr. Sinclair, Dr. Mark Oliver, Patricia's psychiatrist, had said, "Her recovery has been remarkable." When she learned that Ronald was in prison and no longer a threat, she began to remember everything. The reunion between Patricia and her son Gabriel had been emotional. The boy, now 9, had spent all that time with his grandmother, believing his mother had abandoned him. Discovering the truth about her sacrifice to protect him brought emotional healing for both. "Uncle Theodore," Lily called from the yard, "come see what Grandpa Jasper painted." Theodore went out into the garden and found Jasper smiling proudly, holding a paper on which he had painted something that vaguely resembled a blue bird. His lucid moments were rarer now, but when they occurred, they were filled with a sweetness that compensated for all the pain of the disease. "It's very beautiful, Dad," Theodore said, sitting beside them on the grass. "It's for Lily." Jasper explained with surprising clarity. "She always draws birds for me, so I thought I'd return the favor." "I'll keep it forever, Grandpa," Lily promised, hugging the old man carefully. Beatrice appeared at the door, walking slowly with the help of a cane. Her health had stabilized with the proper treatments they could now afford thanks to the restitution from Ronald's crimes. She still coughed occasionally, but it was no longer the desperate cough of someone dying without care. "Lunch is almost ready," she announced, and Brandon called. "He'll be here at 2 with a surprise." Theodore smiled. Brandon had become a regular visitor in recent months, always bringing gifts for Lily and engaging in long conversations about the honest business they planned to start together. The young man had matured significantly, learning to value integrity over easy profit. "What kind of surprise?" Lily asked, her eyes shining with curiosity. "He wouldn't say," Beatrice laughed. but he said you would like it very much. At 2 o'clock sharp, Brandon arrived driving a new car, accompanied by a young woman with brown hair and a warm smile. "Dad," he said, looking nervous, "I want you to meet Marina, my fiancée." Marina approached Theodore naturally, extending her hand. "Mr. Sinclair, Brandon has told me so much about your family. It's an honor to meet you." "The honor is ours," Theodore replied, immediately noticing how Marina looked at Lily with genuine affection. "And this must be the famous artist Lily," Marina said, crouching down to be at the girl's level. "Brandon showed me some of your drawings. They're beautiful." Lily, initially shy, soon warmed to Marina's attention. "Do you like to draw too?" "I love it. In fact, I work at a publisher that publishes children's books. I'm always looking for new talent." Lily's eyes widened. "Real books? With pictures inside?" "Exactly. And who knows, maybe one day you'll draw for our books." During lunch, Marina charmed the whole family with her simplicity and genuine interest in each person's story. She listened intently as Violet talked about her recovery, asked caring questions about Jasper's condition, and sincerely complimented Beatrice's cooking. "Brandon told me about everything you've been through," she said later when they were all sitting in the yard. "About how you chose to do the right thing, even when it cost you everything you had." "It didn't cost everything," Theodore corrected, looking around at his family. "It gave me everything that really matters." "That's exactly what made me fall in love with Brandon," Marina confessed. "When he told me how he had learned to value integrity through his father's example, I knew he was the man I wanted to spend my life with." Lily, who had been quiet during the adult conversation, suddenly stood up and ran into the house. She returned a few minutes later carrying a folder with her best drawings. "Aunt Marina," she said formally, "can I show you my real drawings?" "Of course you can." Lily opened the folder, revealing dozens of drawings she had made over the past few years. But they weren't the simple scribbles of a child. There was a clear progression in her skills, a growing sophistication that surprised even Theodore. "Lily, these drawings are incredible," Marina exclaimed, genuinely impressed. "Look at this one, it's a complete comic story." It was true. Lily had created a sequence of drawings telling the story of a family of birds who find a lost fledgling and adopt it as their own. The visual narrative was touching and surprisingly mature for a 6-year-old. "Lily inspires me every day," Violet said proudly. "She has turned our pain into art, our experience into stories of hope." That afternoon, while Marina and Brandon played with Lily in the yard, Theodore found himself alone with Violet in the kitchen, preparing coffee for everyone. "Theodore," she said softly, "I never properly thanked you for what you did for us." "Violet." "Let me speak," she interrupted. "When I was lost in that clinic, not even knowing my own name, I had only one certainty in my heart, that Lily was safe because someone good was taking care of her." "Lily saved me too," Theodore replied. "She taught me what family really means. And now, what comes next?" Theodore looked through the window, watching his makeshift but perfect family. "Now we continue to grow together. Brandon will get married, maybe give Dad grandchildren to meet. Lily will continue to develop her artistic talent. You will continue to heal and be the wonderful mother you always were. And you, I will continue to be grateful every day for that morning when a brave little girl appeared on my doorstep and changed my life forever." At the end of the afternoon, as Brandon and Marina were saying goodbye, Lily handed a special drawing to her future sister-in-law. "This is for you to keep," she explained. "It's our whole family together, but now you're in it too." In the drawing, all the familiar figures were present: Theodore, Violet, Lily, Jasper, Beatrice, and Brandon. But now there was a new figure with brown hair next to Brandon. And in the sky, small birds flew free, colorful and happy. "Lily," Marina said with tears in her eyes, "this is the most beautiful gift I have ever received." That night, after everyone was asleep, Theodore went out into the yard and looked at the stars over Asheville. 3 years ago, he was a man lost in his own life, rich in money, but poor in love. Today, he was exactly who he was always meant to be. The journey had been painful, full of loss and sacrifice, but every difficult choice had been worth it to reach this moment of complete peace. Ronald was serving a 20-year prison sentence. Patricia had been reunited with her son and started a new life. The children injured in the bus accident had received fair compensation and proper medical treatment. And there, in that simple but love-filled house, a family united not by blood but by choice continued to grow, teaching each other that true wealth is not measured in money, but in moments like that. Theodore smiled, knowing that tomorrow would be another day of small challenges and joys, another day of being a father to Lily, a son to Jasper, a friend to Beatrice, and a life partner to all those he had chosen to love. And in her room, Lily slept, clutching her teddy bear, dreaming of free birds flying high in the sky, carrying stories of love and family to places where other people needed to learn that it's never too late to choose to do the right thing. Love had won. The family had found itself. And all of them, finally, were home. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment what you thought of my story, giving it a score from 0 to 10, and thank you so much.